You thought finally the madness that we could all see taking place, the sort of warping of young people's minds to think that they're not a girl and they're not a boy, that they can be something different. And, you know, kids go through all sorts of processes of make-believe. I know I did. I used to love Cities of Gold, this cartoon on television. And one week I was Zia and the other week I was Esteban. Didn't really matter. I was allowed to be a tomboy. I was allowed to wear my brother's shell suits and scrape my knees and fall off bikes and climb trees without anybody saying to me, oh, guess what, Alex, you could also be boy Alex, not just girl Alex. And yet something's happened in the 21st century where we seem to be actively encouraging young people to not have the blue toy or the pink toy, not play with the dumper truck, but pick up a Barbie instead. And then as a result, we've got a whole load of kids who are beginning to wonder about what gender they are. And yet we thought we finally put safeguarding in place and common sense back in action when the Tavistock Clinic was closed, when the Supreme Court ruled that biological sex was the only type of sex that there is. And then we learned that the NHS are now going to be assessing children under the age of 7 for gender identity issues. Forget the CAS review, forget all the information that we've been given, forget all the clinicians and the psychiatrists and people who've said this stuff is dangerous. No, apparently we're still dancing to that tune. Well, let's speak now to Charlotte Griffiths, editor-at-large of The Mail on Sunday. Charlotte, I mean, it's all very wonky anyway, the minute people start going down the wormhole of are you a boy or are you a girl and encouraging little kids to question this. But I thought at least as a society we had realised the dangers, the perils that we faced and put checks and balances on this kind of nonsense. What has happened?
Well, I was reading this article and reading between the lines. I think what they're trying to do is get the parents who believe their kids are trans or have entertained the idea of their kids being trans into the doctor's office, because it did say that what they need to do is assess the chances that the parents or the kids might have a neurodiversity issue. And so that's why they're trying to see these kids who are under 7, because they're almost acknowledging that it is a little bit unusual to believe that a toddler can be trans. So they're trying to sort of get them in the system. So that's probably as far as I'd go to defend the idea. Mostly I think it's obviously crazy. I don't think toddlers can be trans. I've got nothing against trans people. I've got 3 children under 6 myself. I know that they don't understand the difference between genders and sex. Yeah, they just don't. They don't actually even see skin colour, which is a wonderful thing. And my little 5-year-old the other day, I came home, she'd cut all her hair off, which I gather is a real rite of passage for mothers like me. And the reason was because she felt that day that she wanted to have a boy's haircut. Now, 2 days later, she was crying because she couldn't have plaits and she wanted a hairband to cover it all up. But on that day, she thought she was a boy, so she cut off all her hair. And the phase lasted 24 hours, unlike the haircut, sadly.
So what you're saying is kind of what I think, you know, people like you and I have known from the beginning, that there is almost a sort of Hollywood genesis of middle-class trendiness of parents who suddenly think, oh, I'm going to go along with, I'm not bringing up my child as a boy or a girl, I'm so open-minded, this is wonderful. And perhaps actually this is a mechanism for safeguarding, because it gives those parents some sort of outlet to have taken their kids to a clinic where they can say to their friends, I've taken my children to a gender clinic, and actually the hope is the gender clinic will say, this is growing up and that is all it is.
Exactly that. And what's so interesting is this under 7s clinic isn't in any way, you know, drugs or anything. It's literally just talking therapy, partly to explain to the parents and reassure the parents. I don't actually even blame parents that much, because they've had gender ideology forced down their necks. And a lot of parents, such as myself, perhaps unkindly, if my kid says she's going to be a boy for the day, I just sort of brush it off, you know, and that's probably what they did in the 80s. But there would be some parents who are caring for their kids, and they've had all this gender ideology pushed down them, and it's everywhere, and the teachers espousing it, and they're thinking, oh God, if I don't recognise that my child wants to be a boy, my child wants to be a boy, maybe I'm a bad parent. So in a way, they do need to speak to somebody and just get that reassurance that, you know, it's okay, kids go through phases. It's amazing we have to spell it out. Certainly, I was a child of the 80s. In the 80s, I just wasn't listened to about anything. You know, I was told to go outside, a bit like you were, Alex, told to climb a tree and just get on with it. You know, mums were busy and there was less, of course, there wasn't social media, there wasn't TikTok. There was just less noise around parenting. And so parents, I think, were less anxious back in the day. now they are a bit anxious and they need to be told, don't worry, if you can't be trans. If you're a toddler, it's probably a phase. Here's how to talk it through.
Do you think a much needed step now, and I'm pretty sure like me, you're a huge defender of free speech and liberty and the state not interfering in entertainments and broadcasting and the lot of it, but is there possibly a point that we're going to reach at some point where there has to be a conversation with producers of television programmes or publications, entertainment series, the big .com industries, where they have to be told, you've got to stop spouting this gender ideology stuff, because guess what? Kids are impressionable. And guess what? Parents have enough on their hands without having to worry what sort of mad concept their kids have been exposed to. They're going to come home and say, I want to be a different gender. I think I'm this. I'm too fat. I often think about, I often compare what has gone on with the trans ideology with anorexia. If a kid came home and kept saying, I'm too fat, I'm too fat, I'm too fat, I want to lose weight, that was never affirmed. You didn't have parents taking kids to doctors and go, oh, okay, then we'll fit a gastric band, or we will give you Ozempic. It was, your body is absolutely fine, you're not too fat, and we're going to treat this as a psychological issue. Whereas in the whole gender debate, it was constantly affirmed. You believe that, and so therefore it must be true. Do we now need to be having a conversation with all of those platforms and entities that lauded, celebrated and propagated all of this stuff?
I think so, and I certainly think teachers really need to be very, very responsible when it comes to issues like this, because mums chatter on the school gates, they do, and these things can become they can snowball really. But the other thing I would say, it's a slightly similar point, is toy manufacturers. If they make toys that are just for boys and toys that are just for girls, they sell twice as many toys. So they also but are sort of perpetuating this idea that genders are very, very different. You have Barbie dolls and you have Lego. And Lego is advertised to boys. We all know that girls love Lego as well, and sometimes boys love Barbie dolls. That's actually a big kind of capitalism situation here, where the idea of gender is being forced onto kids. I remember in the 80s, we all had pudding bowl haircuts, no matter whether we were a boy or a girl. Boys used to wear those little leather shoes, which are now, I think, are quite feminine, with the sort of T-bar at the front, and frilly shirts and things. This idea that, as soon as you go to Primark, the girls have to go to the Barbie pink section and the boys have to go to the Spider-Man T-shirt section. And if you show an interest in the Spider-Man T-shirt, maybe you're having gender issues, because how could you like the boys section T-shirt? So there's a lot of different spheres here where gender is, in many different ways and for different reasons and motivations, being sort of shoved down children and adults' throats.
Oh, Charlotte, I was a kid of the 80s as well, and let it be known that if we had known each other as little kids, I would have invited you to the wedding ceremony between He-Man and Barbie, with Mumra officiating and a whole cavalcade of My Little Ponies as part of the wedding profession. That was the perfect union of girls and boys' toys.